So as I was putting together my Mastering Midlife keynote speech, I was using Michael Jordan as a metaphor for evolving in your career and how Michael, when he first got into the league, was in a league of his own, but was really uh, reliant on his physical prowess and the headwinds that he hit until he learned how to use his team, how to use his skills, and how to be a leader, and how that changed his game. And I was talking to my son, Zack Silverman, who happens to be a baseball expert, who you should follow at ZachMatt4 on Twitter for all your baseball needs, plus lots of prospect evaluation on his Twitter feed about Michael Jordan. And he mentioned to me about Greg Maddux, a very, very famous pitcher, Hall of Fame pitcher, and how he evolved in his career. So I asked Zach if he would come on and talk about it on the show. Zach, thanks for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
A father-son duo here, and you do baseball podcasts also, right?
I've done a couple talking about the draft.
What's the organization that you're working with and that you write for?
Prospects Worldwide.
Okay, what's your URL for that?
It's prospectsworldwide.com.
All right, we'll put all that in the show notes and plus your Twitter handle. So you and I were talking about Michael Jordan, and then you mentioned Greg Maddux and how things changed for him as his career progressed. So he didn't necessarily start out the same pitcher as he ended up. Would you be willing to take us through his career progression?
Yeah, sure. So I think one difference between Michael Jordan and Greg Maddux is that I think Jordan was always a freak athlete. Maddux was actually considered less of a prospect than his brother. He was considered he wasn't physical enough. He was a little skinny. He wasn't big, and he had average stuff. He threw hard, but not crazy hard. And he was always smart. He actually said that he always focused on command from the very start, from throwing strikes where he wanted them. But when he first came up, he was kind of an average pitcher. He was drafted, I believe, in the second round, and he had about average stuff. He threw low 90s, which was on par with everyone else. And he threw strikes. He knew how to do his stuff. But as he kind of grew in the game, he really focused on the command aspect, and not just command, but also pitch sequencing and understanding his hitters. So
actually, just break down each one of them. What is command?
So command is the ability to throw the pitch where you want it. So the catcher will set up low and in, up and away, different spots around the zone, and command is the ability to hit that spot either with a fastball or with a curveball or with any kind of pitch that might move, and be able to command the movement of that pitch. That a curveball might start at the shoulders and end at the knees, be able to land it where you want to land it.
So young pitchers are usually drafted because of their velocity. They can throw really hard, and then they start to learn the nuances of pitching as they grow in the league, right?
Correct. Yeah, it's always been that way. It's more so that way today because velocity is just going up and up and up. But yes, it's always been that way.
Okay, so now what is pitch sequence?
Pitch sequencing is understanding how to make your pitches work off each other instead of siloing each pitch. Understanding, I backed him off the plate with a fastball on the last pitch. Maybe I want to throw him a changeup away on this pitch because he's looking inside.
So in other words, so you pick your pitches to confuse the batter and get the batter a little bit off guard.
Yes. Most Wade Boggs, I believe, said, but Wade Boggs being a Hall of Fame hitter, I believe it was him who said that it felt like Greg Maddux was in your head with you when you were at the plate, because Maddux knew what you were thinking and he would throw the exact opposite of what you were thinking all the time. So he used each individual pitch, not just within an at-bat, but from at-bat to at-bat, from game to game. He would even go months at a time remembering what he threw to you a couple of months ago and using that to set up, using the pitch he last threw to you in June to set up the pitch that he's now going to throw to you in September.
It's funny because real good magicians will plan things months in advance. They'll mail things. They'll put stuff in months in advance just for one really good performance. So now the third thing you said was he did research on all the hitters, so he understood his opponents.
Oh yeah, he researched every lineup. I'm sure he researched it before the game, and I'm sure he researched it throughout the season, even if he wasn't playing them for a while. But he knew every hitter on every other team, what they like to swing at, when they were aggressive, when they like to take pitches, and he used that to his advantage. And he also researched what he threw them. So he knew if I haven't faced this guy in 2 years, but I remember I threw this guy this pitch last time I faced him, understanding how to use that against him next time. I think hitters used to say they believed that he remembered every pitch he ever threw.
So do you think he started out as a Hall of Fame pitcher?
No, it was always special kind of between the years. He was always special in terms of his understanding of pitching, but that didn't really evolve until, he was in the league for a little bit. Cause I think people know him as a command artist, somebody who doesn't walk a lot of batters, but he was walking, he walked, I think, like over 80 batters one year, which is, it's not crazy, but it's a high number up early in his career. So he always knew it, but he had to grow into being able to execute on what he knew.
So tell me about his career projection. How did he start out, and how is he known and remembered?
So he started out pretty good. He was never a bad pitcher. He started out a pretty serviceable pitcher for the Cubs, like kind of a mid-rotation kind of.
And what was his velocity when he started?
Low 90s.
Okay, and then it started to decrease with age, right?
Yeah, it sort of decreased with age. It decreased to be around 90, and then maybe into the upper 80s. And then by the end of his career, he was in like the mid 80s, which I play in a men's league in Dallas, and I face mid 80s. So that's not.
But you
fast.
Probably couldn't hit Greg Maddux either.
Well, he just, even if he threw 86, his fastball had crazy movement. Like it had late movement. It would 60 feet 6 inches from the mound to the plate. The pitch would travel 57 feet and then dart to the side.
So movement is they somehow defied the laws of gravity with their pitches. So when it gets to you, it's not where you think it's going to be.
Right. Movement, changing speeds. That's another thing we talk about is he would change speeds as well. Take a little bit off his fastball. He might throw 190 and then throw 187, just changing speeds to keep you off balance. Changing between his fastball and his changeup and, his slider and everything. But in terms of his career progression, he ended up he was pretty good with the Cubs. He started to get better with the Cubs. And he really took off when he went to the Atlanta Braves in the early 90s. And for that whole decade, for the 90s, he was, arguably the best pitcher in all of baseball, just in that he never walked anybody. He threw kind of every pitch exactly where he wanted it. He knew exactly what he was doing all the time, and you couldn't score off him. He generated a lot of weak contact as well. He never struck out a lot of batters, but he was able to just miss the barrel of the bat with with pretty much perfect execution. Typically nowadays, pitchers who can just miss the barrel of the bat, it's not always sustainable because your margin for error is so small. But for him, it didn't matter that his margin for error was so small. He executed it every time.
You tell a story about an exhibition where the catcher had his eyes closed or something.
Yeah. So I think there was always a saying that you could catch Greg Maddux with your eyes closed because his command was so perfect. You just hold your glove up, and from 60 feet away, he'd hit that glove. And it was always, that's ridiculous. Even a pitcher who has good command would probably hit the thumb or the pinky or something. It's not easy to do, and it's even harder than it sounds. But I think one day late in his career, they decided to test that theory. Greg didn't want to do it. Greg, of course, obviously he didn't want to be liable for that.
No.
But the catcher was all for it, and the coaches were all for it, and they said we'll do it. And they had Maddux line up with the catcher, and they had someone standing next to the catcher who would tell him when to close his glove, because it would just hit, if he had his eyes closed, it would just hit the glove and pop out. So the manager stood there and was going to tell him to close the glove, and I think the first one or two tries he hit him in the glove, but the catcher closed it too late. But I think it was on the second or third try that, all three times he hit the glove. But I think on the second or third try, the catcher was able to, with his eyes closed, catch the ball. And I think Greg was like, all right, I'm never doing that again.
But it was proven. So it was proven.
It was proven.
So what you're saying is now, even with diminished physical ability, his dominance was supreme.
Oh yeah. And he's considered by some to be, he's in the conversation. Most people probably wouldn't say he's the best of all time, but he's in the conversation up there, top 5-10 pitchers of all time. He got into the Hall of Fame easily. Like, he didn't squeak into the Hall of Fame. And in baseball, I don't know about other sports, but in baseball, a lot of players that you would think would be easy, like not a lot of players just breeze into the Hall of Fame. Even the greats usually squeak in. I think only one player has ever gotten in unanimously.
Who's that?
That's Mariano Rivera.
Yeah, easily done.
But
cool. So what do you take away from his career? What lessons can you learn from his career?
I think you understand the power of research and the power of outsmarting your opponent and not kind of just going up and the power of preparation, because he was always prepared. He always knew exactly what he was going to do. He had a game plan, and he went out and he executed it. Of course, he's the best ever at what he did, at the
Mhm.
way he pitched. He's the best ever. So now I think nowadays people use Greg Maddux as an example to say, oh, you should be velocity doesn't matter, just throw strikes or whatever. Which Greg Maddux was the best ever at what he did.
Mhm.
But I think the biggest thing that others can take away from it is the value of preparation, understanding your opponent, and sticking with your game plan and executing your game plan.
Nice. And as the old guy here, I will throw in what we learn is that we can use brute force when we're younger. We can work twice as many hours as everybody else, burn the candle at both ends, and hustle just really hard. But as we get older, as we get more responsibility, as our lives change, we have to evolve and we have to figure out different ways to win. We have to figure out different ways to compete. And I think Greg Maddux is a great example of using the tools that you have and sharpening them even better and not relying on the things that are going away. So thanks, Zach. This was great. I really appreciate you doing this for me.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I always love talking about baseball.
Oh, it's awesome. We'll have you back for other topics too. To everybody else, thank you for this analogy and spending time with my son and I. I love you. Have a great rest of the day.
All right, love you, Dad.